He sent me a wedding invitation after 7 years of complete silence. And like the absolute fool that I am, I went. I drove 6 hours, put on a dress, and walked into the most beautiful, heartbreaking, confusing day of my entire life. By the end of it, I was standing in a room with a man I once loved more than I knew how to say, and there was no bride. There was never going to be a bride. And the reason why destroyed me in ways I am still quietly rebuilding from. Stay with me. I promise you, by the time I'm done, you'll understand why I'm still shaking. My name is Elena Vasara. I'm 28 years old. I'm a trauma nurse in Baltimore, which means I spend most of my days holding things together for other people while my own life quietly falls apart in the background. I'm good at that, holding things together, showing up, staying calm when everything is collapsing. People think it's a professional skill. Honestly, I think I just learned it young because I had to. I grew up in a military community in coastal Virginia. My mother was the base physician, the kind of woman who could set a broken bone and bake a birthday cake in the same afternoon. And right next door to us, for as long as I can remember, lived the Vane family. Old military money, the kind that comes with a colonial estate and a surname that carries weight in every room it enters. Admiral Vane was this enormous, quiet force of a man, and his son, Leonardo Ashford Vane, was my entire world from the time I was 9 years old. Not my boyfriend, not exactly. It's hard to explain what Leo was to me. He was the person who knew how I took my tea before I did, the person who showed up at my door the night I failed my nursing entrance exam with a container of my mother's soup that he'd somehow convinced her to make without telling her why. He fit in my life in a way that felt less like a choice and more like something that had always simply been true. And then, the summer after our first year of separate colleges, everything fell apart. In one afternoon. Over a lie I didn't know was a lie. His name comes up and I feel like I have to explain the whole history, because the invitation didn't make sense without it. 7 years ago, I was told, by our mutual friend Daria, that Leo had been laughing about my feelings behind my back, that he'd been telling people I was obsessed with him. Daria was sharp and convincing, and I was 21 and humiliated, and I believed her completely. I confronted Leo at the worst possible moment, his father's retirement ceremony, in front of people Leo had spent his whole life trying to make proud. I said things I cannot take back. He went white as a sheet. He opened his mouth to speak, and I walked away. I blocked him before he could follow up. I told myself I was protecting my dignity. Funny how we dress our worst moments in noble language, isn't it? I didn't know then what I know now, that Daria had invented every single word. What Leo had actually said to her in private the week before was that he was falling in love with me and didn't know how to tell me without losing what we had. She took that and turned it into something unrecognizable, fed it to me at exactly the right moment, and watched the whole thing detonate. I found that out later, much later, in a room I never expected to be standing in. For 7 years, we didn't speak, not once. I'd hear his name occasionally, through old neighbors, through his cousin who still followed me on social media, and I'd feel this dull, specific ache, the kind you get from a wound that healed wrong. His mother saw me in a grocery store once, maybe 3 years after everything, and she looked at me with an expression I couldn't decode. Before she walked away, she said, "He never said that, Elena. Whatever you were told, it wasn't from him." And then she was gone, and I was standing in the cereal aisle holding a box I didn't need, with no idea what to do with what she'd just handed me. So I buried it, like I bury most things, and I kept moving. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, I found an envelope at my apartment door, not in my mailbox, at my actual door, which meant someone had hand-delivered it. It was heavy, cream-colored, gold-embossed. Inside was a wedding invitation. Mr. Leonardo Ashford Vane requests the honor of your presence. My hands were shaking before I finished reading the first line, and at the very bottom, underneath the date and the venue name, were in handwriting I would recognize in my sleep, were 4 words. Please, I need you. I sat on my kitchen floor for 20 minutes. I'm not even exaggerating. 20 minutes, back against the cabinet, trying to decide if I was going to cry or throw up or both. And then I did something that probably tells you everything you need to know about me. I started planning what to wear. I broke up with the man I was seeing the night before I left. His name doesn't matter. I only ever thought of him as fine. He was fine, he was kind, and he deserved someone whose whole heart was in it. He asked me why. I said, because I'm driving 6 hours to watch someone I hurt get married, and I think that probably tells you everything. He didn't argue. I respected him for that. I arrived at Renmore Estate on a Saturday afternoon in early October. The trees were just starting to turn, and the property looked exactly like you'd imagine. Grand, weathered, the kind of beauty that only comes from age. But something was wrong before I even reached the door. The parking lot was almost empty. I counted 11 cars. 11 for a Vane family wedding? Leo's father once had 200 naval officers at his birthday dinner. My stomach did something uncomfortable, and I told myself I was overthinking it. I was not overthinking it. Inside, the estate was decorated, flowers, candles, white ribbon along the pews. But the entire left side of the venue, the bride's side, was completely bare. No flowers on those seats, no programs, no name cards, nothing. I recognized a few of Leo's cousins near the back, his uncle, his old commanding officer from his time in the Navy, which surprised me. Leo had served briefly before joining his family's maritime logistics firm, but no one I didn't recognize. No strangers who might belong to a bride's family. Just a strange, heavy silence that sat over everything like weather. I found the wedding coordinator, a woman named Bet, clearly flustered, and asked her where the bride's guests were being seated. She went very still. And then she said, "Ma'am, why don't you speak with Mr. Vane directly?" and walked away fast enough to nearly knock over a floral arrangement. My stomach dropped straight to the floor. They directed me to the groom's suite at the end of the east corridor. I walked the whole length of it in heels on marble, and the sound echoed, and I had this sensation the whole time, like walking towards something I could feel but couldn't yet see. I knocked, and from inside I heard his voice say my name. Not "come in," just "Elena," like he'd been waiting, like he knew exactly who was standing at that door. I opened it. He was alone, standing by the window in his navy dress whites, which I hadn't expected and which hit me somewhere deep and stupid in the chest. No groomsmen, no last-minute chaos, just Leo, looking like he hadn't slept properly in a week, watching me with an expression I couldn't name. I asked him where his bride was. He said, "There isn't one." Wait. That was genuinely my first thought. Just wait, because my brain could not catch up. I said, "What do you mean there isn't one?" And he said the words I have been turning over in my head every single day since that afternoon. He told me there was never a wedding, never a bride. He had spent 4 months constructing the entire thing, booking the venue under the family name, which no one questioned, having his cousin send invitations to a small, trusted circle who already knew the truth, all of it, every last gold-embossed detail, designed with one single purpose, to get me into a room. Because he knew me. He knew I'd delete every text, ignore every letter, refuse every invitation to coffee or lunch or anything that asked me directly to face him. But I would come to his wedding, even if it hurt me, even if it cost me everything, because that's what I do. I show up for people I love, even when I'm the one who's bleeding. He said, "You would have deleted every message I sent, but you couldn't delete this. Because that's who you are, Elena. You always show up, even when you're the one who's hurting." Oh no. Standing there, I felt something crack open in my chest that I'd spent 7 years keeping sealed. And then he told me the truth about Daria, about what he actually said to her that week, that he was falling in love with me and terrified of losing what we already had. He showed me things he had saved, printed emails, screenshots on a hard drive, the kind of obsessive, desperate documentation of a person who always knew someday they'd need to prove something. He had tried to follow me that afternoon at his father's ceremony. He ran after me across the lawn. I didn't look back. I didn't even know. And then he wrote me 12 letters, physical letters, because he remembered I didn't trust digital things when I was emotional. My mother had thrown them away unknowingly, thinking they were promotional mail. He thought I'd read every single one and chosen silence anyway. We both spent 7 years grieving each other, alive, completely alive, just grieving each other from opposite sides of the same silence. I started crying somewhere in the middle of that, and I couldn't stop. I told him the fake wedding was an unhinged, manipulative, absolutely unhinged thing to do. I said this while tears were running down my face, and he said, "I know," very quietly, and somehow that made it worse. He told me he'd spent 6 months trying to think of another way, that he'd tried to move on, genuinely tried. Twice he'd gotten close enough to plan a real future with someone. He couldn't finish the vows, either time. He said he'd stand there at the altar and see everything clearly for exactly what it was, which was wrong, because the only person he'd ever been able to picture at the end of that aisle was me. There's a particular kind of love that doesn't ask to be held. It just stays, patient, waiting to be seen. He asked me one thing, just one. He said, "I just need to know if there's still something left. Anything at all. If there isn't, I'll go. You'll never hear from me again." I just had to finally ask. After all of it, I had to ask. I'm not going to tell you exactly what I said next. Some things aren't made for an audience. But I will tell you this. I didn't leave that room alone. I think about Daria sometimes, not with the white-hot anger I expected to feel. That passed faster than I thought it would. Mostly, I think about how one lie from one person in one unguarded moment stole 7 years from 2 people who were already standing at the edge of something real. 7 years. That's not nothing. That's birthdays and quiet evenings and bad days you needed someone specific to call. That's first times and last times and all the invisible moments in between. You cannot get those back. You just have to decide, standing in the wreckage of them, what you're going to do with what's left. But here's the thing nobody ever tells you about time. It doesn't just pass. It waits. And sometimes the people who are truly meant to be in your life aren't gone. They're just standing in a room you haven't walked into yet. Leo waited in the last place I ever thought to look, a wedding with no bride, a ceremony built entirely out of desperation and love and 7 years of unsent words. And I walked through that door. And that's the part that keeps me up at night, in the best possible way. If I'm being fully honest with myself, and I think I finally am, the part of this story that undoes me most isn't the fake wedding, or the lost letters, or even the years. It's the quiet, stubborn faith underneath it all. He didn't build that elaborate, ridiculous, beautiful plan because he was certain I'd forgive him. He did it because he couldn't let me believe something false about him. Not for his own comfort, for mine, for my truth. And I wonder sometimes how many of us are carrying a silence we've mistaken for an ending, when really it's just a very long pause before the most important conversation we were always supposed to have.